Rain tapped against the shelter windows as Emma clutched her swollen belly, 7 months along and running out of options. The small backpack at her feet contained everything she owned: a few changes of clothes, a dog-eared pregnancy book, and exactly $43. Her hospital bills had drained what little savings she'd managed to scrape together waiting tables, and the shelter's 30-day limit was fast approaching. "You'll be okay," she whispered to her unborn child, a ritual she'd developed over the past few months. "We'll figure something out." The shelter buzzed with the usual evening commotion: children running between bunk beds, women arguing over bathroom time, the constant undercurrent of desperation that Emma had grown accustomed to. She sat on her thin mattress, scrolling through job listings on the community center's outdated computer printouts. Everything required experience she didn't have, transportation she couldn't afford, or childcare she wouldn't be able to manage once the baby arrived. "Hey, you should look at this," said Marla, an older woman who'd taken the bed beside Emma's 3 nights ago. She slid a slightly crumpled flyer across the small space between them. "Saw it at the bus stop. Might be worth checking out." Emma scanned the paper. "Live-in caretaker needed. High pay. No experience required. Immediate start." The address listed was in Oak Ridge, an affluent suburb across town. Emma had cleaned houses there during her brief stint with a housekeeping service, before morning sickness made it impossible. "Probably want someone without." Marla gestured vaguely at Emma's stomach. "Probably," Emma agreed, but she folded the paper carefully and tucked it into her backpack anyway. Beggars couldn't be choosers, and she was definitely begging. The next morning, Emma caught the 6:15 bus across town, transferred twice, and walked the final half-mile to the address on the flyer. The mansion, there was no other word for it, stood behind an imposing wrought iron gate, red brick and white columns like something from another era. Emma hesitated at the intercom, suddenly aware of her thrift store maternity dress and scuffed sneakers. "Can I help you?" The voice from the speaker was clipped, impatient. "I'm here about the caretaker position," Emma replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. A pause, then a buzz as the gate swung open. Emma walked up the curved driveway, past manicured hedges and a fountain that wasn't running. The front door opened before she reached it. The man who stood there looked as though he hadn't slept in days. His expensive suit hung slightly loose on his frame, his dark hair streaked with premature gray at the temples. He assessed Emma with tired eyes. "Mr. Hartley?" she guessed. "Yes. Come in." He stepped aside, seemingly unsurprised by her appearance. Emma followed him through a foyer larger than her entire childhood apartment, into a study lined with books she doubted anyone ever read. "The position is for my son, Leo," Mr. Hartley explained without preamble. "He's 16. There was an accident last year. He requires full-time care." His voice remained steady, clinical, as though he were discussing a business transaction rather than his child. "I have experience with childcare," Emma offered. It wasn't entirely a lie. She'd babysat through high school and worked briefly at a daycare before college fell through. Mr. Hartley's gaze dropped to her stomach. "When are you due?" 2 months, Emma admitted. "But I can work right up until—" "It doesn't matter," he interrupted. "I need someone who can start immediately. The last 3 nurses quit within a month. Leo isn't." He paused, searching for words. "He's not responsive. Not since the accident. He doesn't speak, doesn't react. The doctors say it's psychological, not physical, but—" He shrugged, a gesture that seemed to encompass his helplessness. Emma waited for him to continue, but he simply stood and motioned for her to follow. They climbed the sweeping staircase to the 2nd floor, down a hallway to a room at the end. Mr. Hartley knocked once, then opened the door. The boy in the wheelchair by the window might have been handsome once. Now he looked like a shell, thin, pale, with dark circles under vacant eyes that stared unseeingly at the garden below. A nurse in scrubs adjusted something on the chair, glancing up with obvious relief when Mr. Hartley entered. "This is Mrs. Chun, the day nurse," Mr. Hartley explained. "She's leaving at the end of the week. If you take the position, you'd be live-in. Your own room, adjacent to Leo's. Full medical benefits, effective immediately." He named a salary that made Emma's breath catch. "I travel frequently for business. You'd be primarily responsible when I'm away." Emma approached the wheelchair cautiously. "Hi, Leo," she said softly. "I'm Emma." Not a flicker of acknowledgement crossed the boy's face. She looked back at Mr. Hartley, who watched with a strange mixture of detachment and desperate hope. "I need someone who can be patient. Kind. Be here when I can't," he said quietly. Emma thought about the shelter, about the baby who deserved better than what she could currently offer, about the emptiness in Leo's eyes that somehow mirrored the hollow feeling in her own chest since Jackson had walked out on her 4 months ago. "Yes," she said, making a decision that would alter the course of 3 lives forever. "I'll take the job." Mr. Hartley nodded once, businesslike. "Mrs. Chun will show you the routines today. You can move in tomorrow." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "There's just one more thing, Ms. Williams. Emma Williams. Ms. Williams. Whatever happened to my son, whatever you see in this house, stays in this house. Is that understood?" The warning hung in the air between them, and Emma felt a chill despite the warm spring day. But she had nowhere else to go, no other options, and for the first time in months, a glimmer of hope. "Understood," she agreed, placing a protective hand over her belly as she looked back at the silent boy by the window. Neither of them had any way of knowing that this arrangement, born of mutual desperation, would become the salvation they both so desperately needed. Emma moved into the Hartley mansion the next day, her few possessions barely filling a corner of the spacious bedroom adjacent to Leo's. The room had clearly been designed for staff, functional but comfortable, with a private bathroom and a small sitting area near the window. It felt palatial compared to the shelter bunk she'd left behind. Mrs. Chin spent 2 days showing Emma the routines, how to help Leo with his morning exercises to prevent muscle atrophy, which medications he took and when, the proper way to transfer him from bed to wheelchair. The boy remained silent through it all, his eyes fixed on something no one else could see. "Don't expect much," Mrs. Chin warned on her last day, voice lowered though Leo sat just across the room. "He hasn't spoken since they brought him home from the hospital. Mr. Hartley hired specialists from all over the country. Nothing. It's like he's locked himself away somewhere we can't reach." "What happened?" Emma asked, carefully folding Leo's laundry, still warm from the dryer. "The accident, I mean." Mrs. Chin glanced toward the door, as if checking for Mr. Hartley. "Car crash. Leo was driving. His mother was in the passenger seat. She didn't make it." She shook her head. "Mr. Hartley doesn't talk about it. None of the staff who were here then are still around. Read into that what you will." After Mrs. Chin left, Emma found herself alone with Leo for the first time. The silence in the house was oppressive, broken only by the ticking of an antique grandfather clock in the hallway and the occasional creak of old wood settling. Emma wheeled Leo to the window that overlooked the expansive backyard, where spring flowers were beginning to bloom in carefully tended beds. "It's beautiful out there," she said, not expecting a response. "Maybe tomorrow we could sit on the patio if it's warm enough." She continued talking as she prepared his lunch, describing the sandwich she was making, commenting on the weather, filling the silence with words that met no reply. Days passed, then weeks. Mr. Hartley was rarely home, leaving early and returning late, sometimes disappearing for days on business trips. When he was there, he checked on Leo briefly, asked Emma perfunctory questions about his son's care, and retreated to his study with a glass of expensive whiskey. Emma noticed how he could barely look at Leo, how his eyes skimmed over his son as if the sight caused him physical pain. The house staff, a housekeeper named Margaret who came 3 times a week, a groundskeeper named Robert who kept to himself, and a cook named Diana who prepared meals and left them labeled in the refrigerator, moved around Emma and Leo like ghosts, efficient and distant. They'd clearly been instructed not to discuss the family with Emma, answering her questions with polite vagueness before changing the subject. As her pregnancy progressed, Emma developed a routine with Leo. Mornings were for physical therapy and education. She read to him from books she found in the family library, everything from classic literature to science textbooks, imagining that somewhere inside, he was listening. Afternoons, when her back ached and her ankles swelled, they sat in the garden or the sunroom, where Emma talked about her own life. "I grew up in Millfield," she told him one afternoon as rain pattered against the sunroom glass. "Little town about 2 hours south. My mom raised me alone. She worked at the diner on Main Street for 20 years. Taught me how to make the best blueberry pancakes you've ever tasted." She smiled at the memory. "I'll have to make them for you sometime. Mom died my senior year, cancer. I tried community college for a while, but without her, I don't know. Nothing felt right." She talked about dead-end jobs, about meeting Jackson at the restaurant where they both worked, about how he'd seemed so different from the other guy she'd dated. She even told Leo about the night Jackson had left after finding out about the baby, how he'd packed a bag while she cried, how he'd said he wasn't father material before walking out the door. "Your dad might be distant," she told Leo, "but at least he stayed. That counts for something." One evening, nearly a month after Emma had arrived, she was reading aloud from The Great Gatsby when she felt the baby kick particularly hard. She laughed, placing a hand on her belly. "Someone's doing somersaults in there," she said. Without thinking, she took Leo's limp hand and placed it where the baby was moving. "Feel that? That's my daughter letting us know she's listening." For just a moment, she thought she felt his fingers twitch against her stomach, but when she looked at his face, it remained impassive. That night, Emma was awakened by sounds from Leo's room. She hurried next door to find him thrashing in his sleep, making small, distressed noises, the first sound she'd heard from him. She sat beside him on the bed, gently taking his hand. "It's okay, Leo," she murmured. "You're safe. It's just a dream." She continued speaking softly until his movements stilled and his breathing evened out. As she started to rise, his fingers suddenly closed around hers, weakly but deliberately. Emma froze, heart pounding. "Leo," she whispered. He didn't respond. His eyes remained closed, but his hand maintained its gentle grip on hers. She sat back down, unwilling to break this first real connection. Eventually, she dozed off in the chair beside his bed, their hands still joined. In the morning, Leo was as vacant as ever, giving no sign of recognizing Emma or remembering the night before. But something had shifted. Emma felt it, even if she couldn't explain it to the physical therapist who came twice a week, or to Mr. Hartley during his brief appearances. She began singing to Leo, lullabies her mother had sung to her, pop songs from the radio, anything that came to mind. She brought wildflowers from the garden and placed them where he could see them. She described the baby's ultrasound pictures in detail, sharing her plans and fears for motherhood. "I've decided to name her Sophia," she told him one afternoon. "It was my grandmother's name, Sophia Grace Williams. What do you think?" She paused, as if he might answer. "I'll take your silence as approval." Weeks passed. Emma's due date approached. Mr. Hartley arranged for a temporary nurse to cover while Emma was in the hospital. Though he seemed distracted when they discussed it, his mind clearly on other matters. One stormy night, when lightning flashed across the sky and thunder rattled the windows, the power went out. Emma found Leo awake in his room, illuminated by flashes of lightning, a slight tremor running through his thin frame. "Not a fan of storms?" she asked gently. Without hesitation, she wrapped a blanket around his shoulders and wheeled him into the adjacent sitting area, where a gas fireplace provided both light and warmth. She settled him on the sofa and sat beside him, another blanket around her own shoulders. "My mom used to say that thunder was just the angels moving furniture," she told him. "Never made much sense to me. Why would angels need furniture?" But it made storms less scary somehow. As the storm raged outside, Emma talked about her childhood, about her hopes for Sophia, about her dream of someday going back to school. She hadn't meant to reveal so much, but in the firelight, with Leo's silent presence beside her, the words flowed easily. Eventually, she dozed off, head tilted against the sofa cushions. She woke with a start when something brushed against her arm. Opening her eyes, she saw Leo's finger twitching, barely touching her skin. His eyes remained fixed ahead, but the movement was unmistakable, deliberate, not the random spasm the doctors had warned might happen occasionally. "Leo," she whispered, "can you hear me? If you can hear me, try to move your finger again." For a long, breathless moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, his index finger tapped once against her arm. Emma felt tears spring to her eyes. "Oh my God," she breathed. "You're in there. You're really in there." She took his hand in hers, squeezing gently. "We're going to figure this out, okay? I promise. You're not alone anymore." The storm continued through the night, but Emma barely noticed. Something far more powerful had awakened in the quiet mansion, something that would soon change everything for the broken family under its roof. Emma didn't tell anyone about Leo's finger movement. Some protective instinct made her keep it secret. Their moment felt too fragile, too precious to be prodded and analyzed by doctors who had already declared him unreachable. Instead, she watched closely for any further signs, creating more opportunities for connection. She rearranged his room, moving his wheelchair to face the eastern windows where morning light streamed in. She brought in a small Bluetooth speaker, filling his space with gentle classical music during the day and soft jazz in the evenings. From the garden, she collected lavender and rosemary, placing them in small vases on his nightstand, introducing new scents to stimulate his senses. "The baby likes this song," she told him one morning, playing a Debussy piece as she folded his laundry. Sophia had taken to kicking rhythmically whenever music played, as if conducting her own private orchestra. "She's going to be a dancer, I think. Or maybe a drummer. Either way, my ribs are taking a beating." Emma was 8 months pregnant now, her movements slower as her body prepared for birth. The heat of summer had settled over the mansion, making the old house creak and sigh. On particularly warm days, she would wheel Leo to the shade of an ancient oak tree in the backyard, where a soft breeze made the temperature bearable. "My doctor says everything looks good," she told him during one of these afternoon retreats. "Sophia's right on track, growing strong. Just a few more weeks now." She hesitated, then added, "I'm scared, Leo. Not about the birth. Well, not just about that. About what comes after." She had been saving every penny of her salary, looking at small apartments near the mansion, planning for a life after Leo no longer needed her. The thought brought an unexpected ache to her chest. "Your dad said I could have maternity leave, but then what? You'll need a caretaker who isn't also caring for a newborn." She sighed, watching a robin hop across the manicured lawn. "I don't want to leave you. Is that strange? I feel like we've just started to find each other." That evening, Mr. Hartley arrived home earlier than usual. Emma was surprised to find him in the kitchen, awkwardly attempting to heat up one of Diana's prepared meals. "Ms. Williams," he acknowledged, looking almost embarrassed to be caught in such a domestic activity. "How is Leo today?" "The same," Emma replied carefully. "We spent some time outside this afternoon. The fresh air seems good for him." Mr. Hartley nodded, his attention seemingly focused on the microwave settings. "And you? How are you feeling?" The question seemed forced, as if he were reading from a script on appropriate employer-employee interactions. "I'm fine. Doctor says everything's on track." An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Emma was about to excuse herself when Mr. Hartley spoke again. "I've been thinking about your situation," he said, still not looking at her. "After the baby comes, I know it will be challenging." Emma's heart sank. Here it was, the conversation she'd been dreading. "Mr. Hartley, I promise I can still take care of Leo. I've been researching how to balance." He held up a hand, cutting her off. "That's not where I was going with this. Actually, I wanted to offer you the East Wing guest suite. It has a small sitting room that could be converted to a nursery. It would give you and the baby more space, while keeping you close to Leo." Emma stared at him, speechless. The East Wing guest suite was practically an apartment unto itself. She'd glimpsed it once while exploring the house during her first week. "That's very generous," she finally managed. "It's practical," he corrected, as if uncomfortable with the suggestion of generosity. "Leo has shown more awareness since you arrived. The physical therapist mentioned it last week. Small things, better muscle tone, more consistent vital signs. I don't want to disrupt whatever progress he's making." Before Emma could respond, the power flickered, then went out completely. Through the kitchen window, she could see storm clouds gathering on the horizon. "Perfect," Mr. Hartley muttered. "The backup generator should kick in for essential systems, but it might take a minute. I should check on Leo," Emma said, using her phone's flashlight to navigate through the suddenly dark house. Mr. Hartley followed, his own phone illuminating the hallway ahead. They found Leo awake in his room, his eyes wide with what Emma immediately recognized as fear. The medical equipment monitoring his vitals beeped erratically as the backup power engaged. "It's okay, Leo," she said soothingly, moving to his side. "Just a storm coming. The power will be back soon." She reached for his hand automatically, and to her surprise, he gripped her fingers with more strength than she'd felt before. Mr. Hartley noticed, his gaze fixed on their joined hands. "Is he?" he began, taking a step closer. A crash of thunder shook the house, and Leo's monitors spiked again. Without thinking, Emma sat on the edge of his bed, still holding his hand. "Remember what I told you about angels moving furniture?" she said softly. "Sounds like they're rearranging the whole living room tonight." To her astonishment, Leo's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but the closest thing to it she'd seen on his face. Mr. Hartley made a strangled sound. "He responded to you," he said, voice barely audible over the rain now pounding against the windows. "Leo." He moved closer, dropping to one knee beside the bed. "Son, can you hear me?" Leo's eyes remained on Emma, but his breathing had steadied. She felt another slight pressure from his fingers. "He's in there, Mr. Hartley," she said quietly. "I've been noticing little things. Movements. Reactions. It's like he's finding his way back, one tiny step at a time." The rain intensified, and thunder cracked directly overhead. The remaining lights flickered, then died completely, plunging the room into darkness save for their phone flashlights. "I'll get candles," Mr. Hartley said, his voice thick with emotion. "And check the generator. It should have fully engaged by now." When he had gone, Emma shifted to sit more comfortably beside Leo. "Your dad saw that," she told him. "He knows you're trying." "That's good, Leo. That's really good." Another flash of lightning illuminated the room, and in that brief moment, Emma saw something she hadn't noticed before. Tears on Leo's cheeks. Not just a single tear, but a steady stream, as if something had finally broken loose inside him. "Oh, Leo," she whispered, reaching to wipe his face. "It's okay. Let it out. I'm here." She continued to murmur reassurances, holding his hand as the storm raged around them. Mr. Hartley returned with candles and a camping lantern, casting the room in a warm, flickering glow. He stopped short when he saw his son's tear-streaked face. "The generator company is sending someone, but with the storm, it could be hours," he said distractedly, eyes fixed on Leo. "Is he?" "He's crying," Emma confirmed. "I think that's a good sign, actually. It means he's feeling something. Processing it." Mr. Hartley set down the lantern and approached the bed cautiously, as if afraid of startling a wild animal. "Leo," he said again, reaching out a tentative hand. For the first time since Emma had arrived at the mansion, Leo's gaze shifted away from her, toward the sound of his father's voice. It wasn't much, just a slight movement of his eyes, but it was deliberate, unmistakable. Mr. Hartley made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. "You can hear me," he said. "All this time you've been." He couldn't finish, overcome with emotion. Emma started to rise, feeling like an intruder on a private moment, but Leo's grip on her hand tightened, keeping her in place. So they sat there, the three of them, in the candlelit room as the storm gradually moved eastward, taking the worst of its fury but leaving behind a steady rain that pattered against the windows. "What do we do now?" Mr. Hartley asked eventually, his businessman's composure reasserting itself despite the redness around his eyes. "We keep talking to him," Emma said simply. "We give him time, space to feel safe enough to come back to us." She looked down at Leo, whose tears had subsided but whose grip remained firm on her hand. "We remind him he's not alone." That night became a turning point, not just for Leo, but for all of them. As the candles burned low and the rain continued its gentle cadence against the house, Mr. Hartley began to talk. Really talk, not in the clipped, formal way he'd communicated before, but openly, honestly. He told Leo about the business deals he'd been working on, about the renovations he was considering for their vacation home in Maine, about the new car he'd bought, but couldn't bring himself to enjoy. Ordinary things, everyday things, the kind of conversation a father might normally have with his teenage son. And though Leo didn't speak, didn't nod or shake his head, the steady rise and fall of his chest and the occasional squeeze of Emma's hand told them both he was listening. Really listening, perhaps for the first time since the accident that had taken his mother and, until tonight, seemed to have taken him too. As Emma finally dozed off in the armchair Mr. Hartley had pulled beside the bed for her, one hand still clasped in Leo's. Her last thought was that the baby inside her had been unusually still throughout the evening, as if Sophia, too, had been listening, bearing witness to the beginning of something none of them yet understood. The days following the storm brought subtle but undeniable changes to the Hartley mansion. Mr. Hartley, James, as he had awkwardly suggested Emma call him during breakfast the next morning, rearranged his schedule to spend more time at home. He called it working remotely, but Emma noticed how often his laptop remained closed while he sat in Leo's room, sometimes reading aloud from the newspaper, sometimes just quietly keeping his son company. For his part, Leo continued his slow emergence. The movements were small, A finger twitch, a slight turn of the head, eyes that now tracked movement across a room. But to Emma and James, each tiny gesture felt monumental. The physical therapist, Dr. Brennan, was cautiously optimistic. It's not uncommon for trauma patients to retreat into themselves, she explained after a session where Leo had deliberately squeezed a stress ball when asked. The mind protects itself however it can. But this kind of breakthrough usually happens within the first few months, not, she checked her notes, 14 months after the accident. So what changed? James asked, watching his son through the doorway where Leo was now resting. Dr. Brennan glanced at Emma, her expression thoughtful. Sometimes it's just the right person, the right connection. Someone who makes it feel safe to come back. The implication hung in the air between them. James cleared his throat, suddenly businesslike again. What's next? How do we build on this progress? They developed a new routine. Mornings were for physical therapy with Dr. Brennan, now coming daily instead of twice a week. Afternoons were for what Emma called regular teenage stuff. Music, movies, even video games that Leo could watch as Emma played, occasionally blinking once for yes or twice for no when she asked which character to choose or which path to take. James usually joined them in the evenings, sometimes bringing work with him, but increasingly leaving it behind to fully engage. One night, Emma found him attempting to teach Leo how to play chess, moving pieces for both sides, but seriously considering what Leo's next move might be based on where his eyes lingered on the board. Your son's going to be a grandmaster, Emma commented, bringing in a tray with tea for herself and coffee for James, decaf, though he pretended not to notice the switch she'd made weeks ago. He's got you cornered in 3 moves. James surveyed the board with mock seriousness. Impossible. I was the Dartmouth Chess Club champion 3 years running. Somehow I doubt they taught that particular move at Dartmouth, she replied, pointing to where Leo's eyes had fixed on a knight that could indeed deliver checkmate in 3 moves. James laughed, a sound that had once been rare in the house but was becoming more common. Betrayed by my own flesh and blood. He made the move Leo had indicated, then toppled his king with a dramatic sigh. Well played, son. Leo's lips twitched, that almost smile that now appeared with increasing frequency. As Emma's due date approached, she found herself torn between excitement for her daughter's arrival and worry about what it would mean for Leo's progress. James had made good on his offer of the East Wing suite, which a team of decorators had transformed into a comfortable living space with an adjoining nursery painted in soft yellows and greens. It's too much, Emma had protested when she saw the hand-carved crib and the plush rocking chair by the window. It's not enough, James had replied simply. The words held more meaning than either of them acknowledged. One evening in late August, with just 2 weeks until her due date, Emma sat with Leo in the garden. The heat of the day had given way to a pleasant warmth, and fireflies were beginning to appear among the rose bushes. James was inside, taking a rare business call he couldn't avoid. I need to ask you something important, Emma said, turning Leo's wheelchair to face her. In recent weeks, she'd taken to addressing him directly, treating his responses, blinks, finger movements, those almost smiles, as part of a real conversation. When Sophia comes, things will change. I'll still be here, still be taking care of you, but I'll have her too. I need to know that's okay with you. Leo's eyes met hers, steady and clear in a way they hadn't been when she first arrived. 1 blink for yes, 2 for no. Are you okay with sharing me with Sophia? Leo blinked once, deliberately. Then his hand moved on the armrest of his wheelchair, fingers stretching toward her. Emma took his hand, feeling the slight pressure as he squeezed. Thank you, she said softly. That means a lot to me. I think you're going to be a great big brother figure for her. The words slipped out before she could consider their implication, that she and Sophia would be a permanent part of the Hartley household, that Leo would have an ongoing role in her daughter's life. Leo's eyes widened slightly, and Emma wondered if he was having the same realization. Before either of them could dwell on it, James appeared on the patio, phone still in hand, but call apparently finished. Everything okay out here? He asked, approaching them. We were just having a chat about Sophia, Emma replied. Leo's officially signed on as honorary big brother. Something complicated passed across James's face, surprise, followed by something softer. Is that so? He pulled a garden chair close to them. Well, honorary big brothers have serious responsibilities. Believe me, my older brother never let me forget it. This was new. James rarely spoke about his own family. Emma had gathered from passing comments that his parents were no longer living and that relations with his brother were strained at best. "You have a brother?" she prompted. James nodded, looking out at the darkening garden rather than at either of them. "Michael, 4 years older. Lives in Seattle now. We don't talk much since." He stopped abruptly. "Since the accident?" Emma guessed gently. "Before that, actually." James sighed. "Michael didn't approve of certain choices I made. My work hours, primarily. He thought I was neglecting Cynthia and Leo for the business." His voice took on a defensive edge. He didn't understand the pressure, the responsibility. Someone had to provide for this family, build something that would last. Emma remained quiet, sensing James needed to talk more than he needed a response. Leo's eyes were fixed on his father, his attention complete. "After Cynthia died, he came for the funeral. Told me it was my fault she was in that car that night. That if I'd been home more, been a better husband, a better father." James's voice broke slightly. He wasn't entirely wrong. The admission hung in the night air, punctuated by the chirping of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. Emma glanced at Leo, whose eyes had filled with tears. "Leo doesn't blame you," she said quietly. "Do you, Leo?" One deliberate blink. "No." James stared at his son, his own eyes suspiciously bright in the patio lights. "You should," he whispered. "I blame myself enough for both of us." Leo's hand twitched on the armrest, fingers stretching toward his father. James hesitated, then took his son's hand, looking startled at the strength of Leo's grip. "I missed your mother's birthday dinner," James continued, the words seeming to pour out of him now. "That's why you were driving her that night. You were taking her to that restaurant on the harbor because I was stuck in a meeting in Chicago. A meeting I could have rescheduled. Should have rescheduled." Leo blinked twice. No. James looked confused. "No what, Leo?" Emma intervened gently. "I think he's saying it wasn't your fault. The accident wasn't your fault." Leo blinked once. "Yes." James shook his head, unable to accept the absolution so freely given. "You don't understand. If I had been there." Leo's monitor began beeping more rapidly, his heart rate elevating. His fingers tightened on his father's hand, and for the first time since the accident, he made a sound, a low, frustrated noise in the back of his throat. "Leo." James leaned forward, alarmed. "What is it? Are you in pain?" Emma watched Leo's face, the concentration evident in his furrowed brow, the determination in his eyes. He was trying to speak, she realized. Really speak. "Take your time," she encouraged. "We're right here. We're listening." Leo's mouth worked silently for a moment. Then, so quietly they had to lean closer to hear, a single word emerged. "Accident." James froze, staring at his son in disbelief. "Did he just—" "Accident," Leo repeated, the word clearer this time. "My fault." And then, as if the effort had drained the last of his energy, Leo's eyes drifted closed, his head slumping slightly against the wheelchair's headrest. The monitor steadied, showing he had simply fallen asleep. James sat back, shock written across his features. "He spoke," he whispered. And he couldn't continue, overwhelmed by what Leo had said. Emma reached across to place her hand over their joined ones. "I think you both need to forgive yourselves," she said softly. And maybe that's what's finally happening here. As darkness settled fully over the garden, the three of them remained connected by their linked hands. James and Emma awake but silent, Leo sleeping peacefully between them, the weight of unspoken guilt finally beginning to lift from all their shoulders. The morning of September 3rd dawned clear and crisp, the first hint of autumn cooling the summer air. Emma woke early, her back aching more than usual, the weight of Sophia pressing uncomfortably against her ribs. Her due date was still 10 days away, but she felt different somehow, restless, on edge, as if her body was preparing for something imminent. She went through the morning routine with Leo mechanically, helping him with his exercises, preparing his breakfast, all while fighting an increasing discomfort that radiated from her lower back around to her abdomen. When Dr. Brennan arrived for Leo's therapy session, she immediately noticed Emma's distraction. "You okay?" she asked, eyeing Emma's hunched posture. "You look like you're in pain." "Just Braxton Hicks," Emma replied, using the term for false contractions she'd learned from her pregnancy books. "I've been having them on and off all week." Dr. Brennan didn't look convinced. "How regular are they?" Emma started to dismiss the question, then paused as another wave of discomfort tightened around her midsection. She checked her watch, remembering the last one had been about 20 minutes ago. "Not very," she said, but her uncertainty must have shown. "Maybe sit this session out," Dr. Brennan suggested. "Go put your feet up. I've got Leo." Emma nodded gratefully, heading to her suite to lie down. She tried to nap, but the contractions, if that's what they were, kept her from fully relaxing. By noon, they were coming 15 minutes apart, unmistakable in their rhythm. She called her obstetrician, who advised her to come in when they were closer together or if her water broke. James found her in the kitchen later that afternoon, gripping the counter as another contraction peaked. "Emma?" he asked, alarm evident in his voice. "What's happening?" "I think I'm in labor," she admitted, releasing a slow breath as the pain receded. But it could still be false. First babies usually take their time. James didn't look reassured. "I'm calling Dr. Chun," and getting the car ready. He was already pulling out his phone, his usual composure nowhere to be seen. Emma placed a calming hand on his arm. "It's okay. We have hours yet. I need to check on Leo first. Make sure Diana knows his dinner routine." "Forget routine," James interrupted. "I'm taking you to the hospital now. Everything else can wait." In the end, they compromised. Emma spent a few minutes with Leo, explaining what was happening while James called the backup nurse agency to send someone immediately. Leo watched her with concerned eyes, his hand reaching for hers when another contraction hit during her explanation. "I'll be okay," she assured him, squeezing his fingers gently. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time, right? And when I come back, I'll have Sophia with me. You'll finally get to meet her." Leo's mouth worked silently for a moment. Then he managed a single word. "Soon." Emma smiled through the discomfort. "Yes, soon. Be good for the nurse, okay? And keep practicing those words with Dr. Brennan. I want to hear a whole sentence when I get back." The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of increasing contractions. By the time they arrived, Emma was dilated to 6 centimeters, already in active labor. "This baby's in a hurry," the nurse commented as she helped Emma into a hospital gown. James hovered uncertainly at the door of the labor room. "Should I? I can wait outside if you'd prefer privacy." Emma looked up from the bed, where she was being hooked up to monitors. "Don't you dare," she said, surprising herself with the vehemence in her voice. "I mean, unless you want to wait outside." James shook his head quickly. "No, I just thought. This isn't really my place." "It is if I say it is," Emma replied, then gasped as another contraction gripped her. "I don't want to be alone." That settled it. James stayed, initially keeping a respectful distance, but gradually moving closer as labor intensified. He fetched ice chips, helped Emma walk the hallways when she needed to move, and even held her hand during the worst contractions, letting her squeeze until his fingers went numb without complaint. "Tell me about Leo," Emma requested during a brief respite between pains. "What was he like before? As a little boy?" James seemed surprised by the question, but after a moment, he began to talk. He told her about Leo's first steps, about his childhood obsession with trains, about how he'd taught himself to read at 4 by following along with bedtime stories. He described a bright, curious boy who loved science and soccer in equal measure, who'd been on track for a scholarship to his father's alma mater before the accident changed everything. He had his mother's laugh, James said softly. When something really struck him funny, he'd laugh until he couldn't breathe. Cynthia was the same way. "Tell me about her," Emma urged, grateful for the distraction as another contraction built. James's expression softened. "She was extraordinary. Smarter than me, though I rarely admitted it. More patient, too. She could always see the bigger picture when I got lost in the details." He paused, his gaze distant with memory. "She used to say that love wasn't about grand gestures, but about showing up every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." The contraction peaked, and Emma gripped his hand, focusing on her breathing. When it passed, she managed a smile. "She sounds wise." "She was," James agreed. "She would have liked you." Before Emma could respond, the monitor beside her bed changed its rhythm, the baby's heartbeat suddenly dropping. A nurse hurried in, followed closely by Emma's doctor. "The baby's in distress," the doctor explained after a quick examination. "We need to do an emergency C-section." Everything happened quickly after that. Emma was wheeled into an operating room, a spinal block administered to numb her from the chest down. James was given scrubs and allowed to stay at her head. one hand gripping hers while a blue curtain separated them from the surgical field. "Talk to me," Emma whispered, fear coursing through her despite the medication. "Please, just keep talking." So James talked. He told her more stories about Leo, about the house in Maine where they spent summers, about the garden Cynthia had designed that still bloomed each year just as she'd planned. His voice remained steady even as the surgical team worked with urgent efficiency on the other side of the curtain. And then, cutting through everything, came a cry, strong, indignant, unmistakably new. "It's a girl," the doctor announced. "Good sized, too, 7 pounds, 8 ounces. The nurse brought the bundled infant around the curtain, placing her gently on Emma's chest. Sophia's face was red and scrunched, her tiny fists waving in protest at her abrupt entrance into the world. "Hello, Sophia," Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I've been waiting for you." She glanced up at James, whose eyes were fixed on the newborn with an expression of wonder. "She's perfect," he said softly. "Would you like to hold her?" the nurse asked him. "Mom needs to be stitched up now." James looked startled, then nodded. He took the baby with careful hands, cradling her close to his chest with surprising confidence. "We'll be right here," he assured Emma. "Take your time." Later, in the recovery room, Emma drifted in and out of sleep, the effects of surgery and the pain medication making her drowsy. Each time she opened her eyes, she found James still there, sometimes holding Sophia, sometimes checking his phone, but always present. "You should go home," she told him during one lucid moment. "Check on Leo. Get some rest." "Leo's fine. The nurse is staying overnight, and Diana's there too." He set his phone down. "I'm exactly where I need to be." The simple statement hung in the air between them, laden with meaning neither was quite ready to address. Emma smiled sleepily, allowing herself to drift off again, secure in the knowledge that she wasn't alone. When she next woke, dawn was breaking outside the hospital window. James was dozing in the chair beside her bed, Sophia sleeping peacefully in the clear bassinet between them. The scene felt oddly right, the three of them together in the quiet morning light. A soft knock at the door roused James from his light sleep. He stood, stretching stiff muscles, and went to answer it. Emma heard him inhale sharply. "What are you? How did you get here?" he asked someone in the hallway. And then, to Emma's astonishment, Leo appeared in the doorway. In his wheelchair, yes, but alert, present, his eyes immediately finding hers across the room. Behind him stood Dr. Brennan, looking both apologetic and pleased with herself. "He insisted," she explained to James. "Wouldn't take no for an answer. Said he had to see the baby." Leo wheeled himself forward, his movements still jerky but undeniably self-directed. He stopped beside Emma's bed, his gaze moving to the sleeping infant in the bassinet. "Sophia," he said clearly, the name perfectly formed on lips that had been silent for so long. Emma felt tears spring to her eyes. "Yes, that's Sophia. Would you like to see her closer?" Leo nodded, an actual nod, not just a blink or eye movement. James lifted the baby carefully and brought her closer to Leo, kneeling so his son could see her face. Sophia opened her eyes at that moment, blinking slowly at the new faces above her. Leo reached out a trembling hand, one finger gently touching her tiny fist. To everyone's surprise, the newborn's fingers opened, then closed around Leo's finger. "Family," Leo said, the word clear and deliberate. Then, with visible effort but unmistakable determination, he added, "Our family." James made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob, his composure finally breaking completely. He looked from his son to Emma to the baby that connected them all, and in his eyes Emma saw a future none of them had imagined possible just months ago. "Yes," she agreed softly, reaching out to take Leo's free hand in hers. "Our family." Outside the hospital window, the sun rose fully over the Boston skyline, casting golden light across the room where 4 broken souls had somehow, against all odds, found their way to each other. The return to the Hartley mansion 3 days later felt like coming home in a way Emma had never experienced before. Diana had prepared a welcome dinner. The housekeeper had filled Leo's room and Emma's suite with fresh flowers, and even Robert the groundskeeper had left a small handmade wooden toy on Sophia's crib, a gesture that brought tears to Emma's eyes when James explained that woodworking was Robert's quiet passion. Dr. Brennan had expanded Leo's therapy to include speech exercises, And though progress was slow, his determination was unwavering. Each new word seemed to unlock something further within him, as if language itself was the key to his recovery. "The brain is remarkable," Dr. Brennan explained one afternoon as they watched Leo carefully form the word book while pointing to what he wanted Emma to read. "Sometimes it creates detours around damaged areas, finding new pathways to accomplish old tasks. Leo's doing exactly that, rebuilding those neural connections bit by bit." Emma had worried that caring for a newborn would mean less time for Leo, but somehow the opposite proved true. Sophia's presence seemed to energize the entire household. James rearranged his schedule permanently, working from home 3 days a week and limiting overnight business trips to absolute emergencies. Leo spent hours watching Sophia, his eyes tracking her every movement with fascination. October brought crisp air and falling leaves to the mansion grounds. Emma, recovered from her C-section, began taking Sophia and Leo on daily walks through the gardens, pointing out the changing colors and the busy squirrels preparing for winter. James often joined them, carrying Sophia in a front pack while Emma helped Leo navigate his wheelchair over the gravel paths. "We should get him an electric chair," James mentioned during one such walk. "Something he could control himself. Dr. Brennan thinks his motor skills are improving enough to manage it." Emma nodded, watching Leo reach out to touch a red maple leaf that had drifted onto his lap. He'd like that independence. These casual conversations had become their norm. Discussions about Leo's care, Sophia's development, household matters, all conducted with the easy familiarity of partners rather than employer and employee. Neither of them acknowledged the shift aloud, but Emma felt it in every interaction, every shared smile over Sophia's first attempts at rolling over, every quiet evening spent in the family room, with Leo practicing his speech while James reviewed contracts and Emma folded tiny onesies. The arrangement remained technically professional. James still deposited Emma's salary into her account each month, though she rarely needed to spend it. Anytime she mentioned looking at apartments closer to town, for eventually, the subject was somehow changed or postponed. One evening in late October, Emma put Sophia down for the night and went to check on Leo before retiring herself. She found him in the family room with James, both of them bent over a chessboard. Leo's hand hovered uncertainly over a bishop. "Queen," he said carefully, pointing instead to the piece he wanted to move. "There." He indicated a square that would put James's king in check. James groaned dramatically. "When did you get so ruthless? You've been watching those chess championships online again, haven't you?" Leo's mouth curved in a small but distinct smile. These expressions were coming more frequently now, genuine emotion breaking through the physical limitations that still constrained him. "Mind if I join you?" Emma asked from the doorway. Both Hartley men looked up, identical expressions of welcome on their faces. The resemblance between them, once obscured by Leo's vacant state, was now striking. The same dark eyes, the same strong jawline, even the same slight furrow of concentration between their brows. "Please," James said, gesturing to the sofa beside Leo's wheelchair. "He's demolishing me again. Maybe you can distract him." Emma sat down, tucking her feet under her. "I wouldn't dream of interfering with such a masterful performance." They fell into comfortable silence as the game continued, Leo communicating his moves through single words and gestures, James pretending outrage at each strategic advance. Emma felt a contentment she'd never known before, a sense of belonging that had nothing to do with legal documents or official titles and everything to do with the intangible bonds that had formed between them all. Later, after Leo had claimed victory and been helped to bed by his night nurse, Emma lingered in the family room, enjoying the rare moment of quiet. James returned from saying goodnight to his son, 2 glasses of wine in hand. "Thought you might like to celebrate," he said, offering her one. "Celebrate what?" she asked, accepting the glass. 3 months. He settled into the armchair across from her. "You've been with us for exactly 3 months today." Emma blinked, surprised. "You're right. I hadn't realized." She took a sip of wine, remembering that desperate morning when she'd first approached the mansion gates, 7 months pregnant and out of options. "It feels like longer." "In a good way or a bad way?" James asked, watching her over the rim of his glass. "Good," she answered without hesitation. "Definitely good." He nodded, seemingly satisfied with her response. They drank in companionable silence for a moment before he spoke again. I've been thinking about making some changes to the household arrangement. Emma's heart stuttered, old insecurities surfacing immediately. Changes? James set his glass down, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. I've consulted with my lawyer about options for formalizing things. Formalizing? Emma repeated, not understanding. For Sophia, he clarified. And for you. A more permanent arrangement. If that's something you'd want. Emma set her own glass down carefully, unsure where the conversation was heading. James, what exactly are you asking? He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking less like the confident CEO and more like a nervous teenager. I'm not doing this very well, am I? He took a deep breath. Emma, in 3 months, you've brought life back to this house. To Leo. To me. You and Sophia, you belong here. With us. I'd like to make that official, in whatever way you're comfortable with. Emma stared at him, processing his words. Are you proposing? Not exactly. Or maybe yes. I'm not sure what the right term is. He gave a self-deprecating laugh. I know it's unconventional. We've never even dated. But I hope, you feel what I feel. This sense that we've somehow become a family. Emma's mind raced. She couldn't deny the truth of his words. Somewhere along the way, between caring for Leo and bringing Sophia into the world, between quiet conversations over late-night bottles and shared concerns over therapy progress, something had grown between them, something deeper than attraction, more solid than romance. It's not just gratitude, James added, as if reading her thoughts. It's not because you helped Leo, though I will always be thankful for that. It's because of who you are, how you see the world, how you've helped me see it too. Emma took a shaky breath. What about my job? Being Leo's caretaker? We'd hire someone. You'd be free to do whatever you want. Go back to school, stay home with Sophia, anything. And if it doesn't work out? She asked softly. What happens to Leo? To Sophia? James's expression grew serious. I would never separate Leo from either of you, no matter what. You have my word on that. Whatever legal arrangements we make would reflect that commitment. Emma stood, needing to move as she processed his words. She walked to the large windows that overlooked the garden, now silvered with moonlight. Behind her, James remained silent, giving her space to think. The truth was, she had fallen in love. Not just with James, though those feelings had been growing steadily, but with this entire unexpected life. With Leo's determination, with the peaceful security of the home they'd created, with the sense of purpose she'd found within these walls. I don't need a legal document to know we're a family, she said finally, turning back to him. But I understand why you're asking. For Sophia's sake. For Leo's. For all of us, James corrected gently. No pressure, no timeline. Just something to think about. Emma nodded, a smile slowly forming. I'll think about it. But James. Yes. Whatever we decide, whatever form it takes, I'm not going anywhere. Leo needs me. Sophia needs you. And I think maybe we all need each other. The following Sunday morning found them in the sunroom, autumn lights streaming through the windows as Emma fed Sophia while Leo practiced his newest skill, drawing. His fine motor control was improving daily, and the occupational therapist had suggested art therapy as a way to strengthen those connections further. James entered with a tray of coffee, setting it down before moving to look over Leo's shoulder. That's really good, son. What is it? Leo pointed to each figure in his childlike but recognizable drawing. Dad, Leo, Emma, Sophia. The stick figures stood in front of a large square house, holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. It's us, Emma said, her throat suddenly tight with emotion. Leo nodded emphatically, then carefully wrote 4 letters beneath the drawing. HOME. James and Emma exchanged glances over Leo's head, a world of understanding passing between them. This unexpected family they'd formed, pieced together from loss and chance and resilience, had become the home none of them had thought possible just months before. Later that evening, after both Leo and Sophia were asleep, Emma found James in his study, working on his laptop. Without a word, she placed a folded piece of paper on the keyboard in front of him. He opened it to find a simple note. Yes. To whatever form it takes. To this family we've built. To home. James looked up, hope and joy evident in his eyes. Emma nodded, confirming the message. He stood, closing the distance between them in 2 steps, and pulled her into an embrace that felt like coming home all over again. Outside, the October wind scattered leaves across the garden where they'd walked that afternoon, for sets of footprints. One wheelchair, one stroller, two adults walking side by side, marking a path they would continue to follow together through whatever challenges lay ahead, bound by a love that had found them when they needed it most.